Caroline looked frantically around as she made her way through the quiet alley to where she would be able to see her school bus. She was a 17-year-old girl, and her experience had created a traumatic fear that she couldn't get over. When she was younger, her family was robbed by some sets of 4 hefty guys who later decided they found a 12-year-old girl attractive that night. Caroline was just 12 then, but the 4 guys forcefully and repeatedly raped her, despite how her parents begged them. It was a traumatic experience for both her parents and her because as she was being forcefully raped, her parents were also forced to witness it in tears. And this had been a constant reason why they hated themselves so much, because of how traumatic that experience was. They tried to live with it, but couldn't outlive it since they knew how that night was affecting their daughter. So they both got drunk one night and died in a car accident while drunk driving. This happened when Caroline was 14, and since then she's had no choice but to live alone in the house where she was raped. She kept to herself and locked herself in whenever she was not needed outside. She would instinctively withdraw herself from society because she was scared. Everything scared her. However, with all these, she still tried to do the best for herself. Ever since her parents died and no family was willing to take her in because of the traumatic experience she had, they believed she would bring bad luck to their family the same way she caused the lousy luck of death to her parents. Well, she got herself a part-time job that would at least provide her with some income. Caroline was a brilliant girl, so she knew that though her parents left her a lot of fortune that would sustain her for a lifetime, she knew she still needed to work because anything could happen at any time. And just like she guessed, about 6 months after her parents passed away, their family members tried to snatch the fortune from her. When that happened, she was happy that she had begun her part-time work because someone at her place of work helped her with the lawyer fighting her case. Since then, she knew none of her family members loved her. She understood that she was all alone and decided to live with it. Every night she was tormented by the dream of what happened when she was 12, but she had no one to run to for shelter, so she would curl up on her bed and cry her eyes out. She had come to the resolution that what was happening to her was now her reality and she had to live with it. Because of her traumatic experience, she got scared of people quickly, especially guys, because they would always remind her of what she wished to forget. She once thought about living an everyday life like every other girl in her school with boyfriends, but she couldn't because her life became abnormal when she was raped. Coming to her reality, she accepted her fate and always followed her daily routine. She would go from her house to her school, from school to the cafe where she worked part-time till around 8 p.m., and then from her place of work, she would go back home to do her assignments and prepare for the next day. She quietly waited at the bus stop for her school bus. As she waited, she saw the glances of people pointing at her as they snickered, and some gave her a pitying look. She hated the comments that were sharing about her so much that she just looked down at the laces of her shoes, hoping her school bus would show up in time and she would leave the bus stop. She hated that she always aroused people's attention wherever she went. She just wanted to be like every ordinary girl, but all that had happened in her life wouldn't permit it. So immediately she saw her school bus. She sighed in relief as she quickly made her way inside and sat at the far end of the corner. Where she sat, she mentally prepared herself again for another terrible day in school. Ever since what happened to her, she never had a typical day at school. If she didn't get bullied by some set of girls for being bad luck to everyone around her, she would be given some food or money by some students that pitied her. And she hated them all, but she couldn't say anything about them. She hated being bullied for something she wished she could erase from her life. She also hated that some people had turned her into a charity case, that they felt they should always donate their things. She just wanted to be ordinary and unnoticed. She just kept to herself on the bus until they got to school. Immediately after they got to the school, she quickly got out of the bus and made her way to where her locker was to prepare for the first class. But getting onto her locker, she was met with a scene that had become frequent in her life. "Caroline, the fucking bad luck witch." This was written all over her locker with red paint. She sighed when she saw it and proceeded to get her books out for the first class. That was not the first time she would see something as wicked as that. so she had gotten used to it. She cried when she first saw it in her locker, but no one came to her rescue, so at that moment she knew it was another thing she had to live with. "Now you're getting bold. How dare you ignore me and what I wrote for you?" One of the girls, her constant bullies, spoke up as the four girls approached her. "I mean, it took me a lot of effort to write out who you truly are in your locker, and you think you can ignore it and go to class? Haven't you heard about me? I wouldn't say I like it when people ignore me. That's why they call me Attention Queen. I love attention," the girl said as she slammed her hand on the locker to scare Caroline. "Can you just shut the hell up? You're disturbing the serenity of the place," a deep voice said from the other side of the room as the locker was slammed. They all looked to where the voice came from, only to see that it was Damon. With that, all four girls turned from vicious to seductive as they gave Damon their most timid and seductive smiles in an innocent way before scrambling away. At the same time, Caroline was just left to look at what was happening timidly. Damon was the most popular boy in school. He was very handsome, but much more popular for not dating any girl in the school. This act of his was hyped to the extent that some people thought that he was gay, which was why he never found girls attractive. But with that, Damon didn't care. He gave no one attention except Caroline once in a while whenever she was bullied, which led to another rumor and one main reason why those four girls drove Caroline. Because of Damon's actions, some people rumored that he was secretly dating Caroline, and because of this rumor, most of the big girls in the school hated Caroline so much and bullied her. They believed she was acting timid to grab Damon's attention, and they were so mad about that because every girl in school wanted Damon for themselves. However, Caroline acted like she didn't know anything. She bowed slightly to Damon for coming to her rescue as she quickly tried to make her way to her class, but she was stopped when Damon held onto her arm. "Why do you always isolate yourself from people? Are you okay? Do they hurt you?" Damon asked her tenderly. But Caroline got all scared that she snatched her arm away from him. If there were anything that she was afraid of, that would be guys. All guys seemed the same to her. Though how friendly Damon was to her, she sometimes felt the need to open her heart up and accept him as a friend. Whenever she was about to, she would constantly be reminded of that night, so she kept to herself. She snatched her arm away from Damon with another bow and scrambled off to her class. However, she couldn't deny that she was beginning to like Damon, and she couldn't follow her mind because that meant she would be giving room to her fears to take over her. "No, please don't. Please stop. Please!" Caroline screamed out from her dream as she felt herself being shaken. She looked to the side to see who saved her from the deadly invention at that moment, only to be greeted with Damon's brown eyes filled with concern for her. "Are you okay? You seem like you're having a bad dream," Damon asked her with concern. Caroline couldn't help how she felt at the moment as she got drowned in the brown eyes looking intently at her. She wanted to hold on to him, but she instinctively withdrew herself from doing that as she stood up abruptly and attempted to leave the classroom they were in. "You know, not all people are bad," Damon said, to stop Caroline from leaving the classroom as he approached her before he continued. "I would be lying if I said I hadn't heard of what you've been through, and this may seem like a baseless sympathy to you, but I want you to know that I'm sorry you have to experience that at such a young age. No one deserves that. That doesn't make everyone around you a villain. Some people want to be your friend. Some people want to be there for you. You don't have to shut yourself away from the world around you. You don't have to let your fear control your life. It would help if you learned how to live with it, and the only way to do that is by facing it head on. I may seem like a bad guy, but I need you to believe I mean no harm. I want to be there for you and help you heal your pain," Damon told her, with concern evident in his voice, as all Caroline could do was cry on the spot she was. She also wanted to open up her heart to the people around her, but she had never seen anyone that would be truthful to her like Damon just did. Most people try to approach her out of sympathy, only to feel sorry for her. But she wanted someone who would like her the way she was and be there to help her heal. When she heard all Damon said to her, she was so happy that she finally found that person. She looked back to where Damon was in tears as they hugged each other. It's okay, Caroline. We can fight through your fear together. We can fight your bullies together. I was also bullied in my previous school before I came here, so I understand your pain. I didn't know you could also be bullied for being too handsome, Damon said jokingly as the both of them laughed. Since then, they both became close, and Damon did his best to stop Caroline from being bullied. With their closeness, he also gradually helped her overcome her fears.
"How dare you, reckless woman!" the man shouted aggressively. Listen, the woman raised her shaky voice to justify, but the situation made her shout down. She was devastated, with tears rolling down her cheeks and terror in her eyes. Looking at this man, she was about to end a fight, but who knows that the only thing that will come to an end will be their relationship. Unknowingly, the man raised his hand over his wife in front of his friends. Initially, a loud chattering among people began, leaving his woman sobbing on the floor. The woman was devastated, lying on the floor with a heavy heart and a shaky voice. Weeping and gathering, she stood back on her feet and rushed back to her room. Locking herself in the room, there was the deadliest silence. A happily married couple lives on 183 North Street in Seattle. In their happily married life, there was something that turned their lives into a hella tragic end to their love, commitment, and charm. Just like the regular days, the wind was fine with glittering sunlight and gliding colors in the sky. "This is the perfect time to cook teriyaki with some marinara sauce. Susan will love this," Mary said to herself with a kind smile on her face. She went straight into the grocery store and gathered the essential ingredients for the kitchen. Susan is the dearest husband, the love of her life, a tall Italian man with a sharp nose and dark brown eyes with a heavy voice. He was an entrepreneur of real estate in Seattle. Besides his incredible interest in business, he was an extroverted person who loved partying and meeting new people. Among his people, there was an extraordinary person. The only one made for him was a blonde American beauty with huge glittery eyes and an innocent smile that could kill anyone. Susan was a businessman who fell in love with pastry chef Mary. In the cold breeze of September 2016, the couple tied the knot to cherish their love and dignity. This was the first time they were moving into their new home, where they would likely meet their children and were going to spend their whole life devoted to their affiliation and family. Susan and Mary were quite enthusiastic about starting a family together. They have always dreamt of having a daughter like Mary, a blonde-haired baby with pretty green eyes. Both were enjoying the best days of life in their lavish home, decorated with love beside the river. The birds chirping in the garden assembled the positive energy around their home. Setting apart their convenience, the couple decided to settle down away from the busiest town of the city. By now, their home was in Riva. The couple has to take a long drive to meet their professional tasks. From Riva to Seattle, it was about 80 miles of distance. As Riva was a small town, and by that time, the concept of public transport was non-existent. Mary was cooking the meal with her lover. It was the anniversary, and she was pregnant. She prepared a surprise for her husband and invited his mates and colleagues for a festive dinner. A helper named Ella preparing for the festive night. It seemed that the couple was in love, and the one we call an ideal couple. But behind the doors, the story is quite different. Mr. Susan is an unapologetically romantic narcissist who constantly manipulates his dear wife to believe in his extramarital affairs. One night before, there was a gruesome argument among them. Susan told his wife there was only one witness to the whole incident, helper Ella. Dabbing the door, Susan left home and went back to his mistress. Ella stood forward to look after Mary. The door was open, and Ella entered saying, "Is everything fine?" she asked hesitantly. "How can it be?" Mary replied, while turning her face towards the window in the room. There was silence, as Mary wasn't in the mood to express her thoughts. The next day, she was enthusiastic about getting her husband back to him by planning a surprise dinner with a baby. Ella was happy to see her like that, but she knew that Susan was a terrible kind that would gradually deteriorate his wife's peace for pleasure. The night was festive as planned, and Susan was just fine. Everyone on the feast was piling their plates with mesmerizing meals and hands full of champagne. People's laughter and chatting in the air seemed perfectly fine. Mary dressed herself accordingly to the great night. She chose a red gown, and her blonde hairs were braided wonderfully, with a minimal makeup look. It seemed that Susan was going to see her for the first time. He looked at her from a quiet distance, but he could smell her scent. Suddenly there was a call, and Susan went to attend to it. On his way back, he went pretty frustrated when he saw his dear friend using his flirtatious tricks to impress his beloved wife. He rushed towards them and grabbed his wife quite aggressively. "There was nothing like that," she uttered. "I don't want to hear from you," Susan replied in a pretty antagonistic tone, and he began to yell at his dear friend named Max. Max tried to defend himself, but Susan was not in his senses. To put the fight to an end, Mary came in between them. Suzanne raised his hand over his dear wife and dragged her to the floor. This was the first time his terrible behavior towards his wife was on the front stage. The night ended with a terrible memory, and Mary left home early in the morning. Suzanne was lying on the couch with a heavy head and wasn't in a position to conclude what happened last night. Stepping into the bedroom searching for Mary, he found a written note. "I am leaving. Mary." Suzanne didn't bother and assumed everything would be fine, and she would return home in a few days. But who knows what gonna has happened? Mary was 2 weeks pregnant, and Suzanne missed the chance to get to know about the arrival of their baby. Instantly, he felt a sense of freedom, that he could have many nights with mistresses and no one would bother him. Days went on and something was kicking him inside. He felt very heavy inside, and it seemed there was a quiet burden over his shoulders. But what exactly was it? He was trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, Mary shifted to her old apartment and began her career as a professional pastry maker. Time went on, and there was a hollow space left behind. Hounding the house, he was missing his dear wife. There was a deep hollow in his heart. Gradually, he cut himself from his mistress and missed the outgoing plan. Day after another, he was getting homesick. He was suffering from an explosion of negation and guilt. He was pretty apologetic over his behavior. He remembers those days when he shut his wife down for his evil mistress, who was after him for his money. But his wife was the only one who loved him, with her kind heart. By this time, his social and emotional health was quite disturbed. Getting locked in the house, Suzanne sensed the scent of his dear wife, and he reached a state where he began to experience the illusions of his wife while baking his favorite pastry for him. The condition of Mr. Suzanne was not quite appealing. Taking a view of the whole situation, Ella informed Mary about her terrible state with Suzanne. Mary hung up the phone, and it seemed she didn't even bother. One day, working at the bakery, Max came to meet Mary. He told her that she should move on with the baby. This was an awful statement, and Mary wouldn't expect that. She was pretty surprised and asked him to leave immediately. Taking a view of the whole situation, Max's intentions towards the Dovebirds are suspicious. He was in love with Mary and always wanted to show her her husband's true face. On the next day, Suzanne received a parcel with a note. Reading the letter made him frustrated, and he left home right away. Driving hastily to the hospital, it was Mary who was going to give birth to their one and only child. Mary hid our child. How cruel she was. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Suzanne reached the city hospital, and Mary was already in the operation theater. Soon, he was accompanied by Mary's best friend, Vinny and Max. The crew was waiting to look after the mama and the baby. Everyone was praying for their health and safety. The doctor said that due to the stressful pregnancy, there was a significant risk during the delivery. Suzanne went straight to the church, praying for the safety of his dear wife, and paid a promise that he would watch his tone and behavior. He wants his wife and child back. He was trembling and shaking, and for the first time, he was seen in such a state of longing for the essential thing in his life. Vinny approached Suzanne and told him that everything was fine. Stepping into the room, he heard the crying of their baby daughter and saw his Mary lying on the bed. You are a warrior. I missed you. Can you forgive me for everlasting happy life?" he said. "So you missed me. Asking for forgiveness is not your way," Mary said to him. The guilt on his face described the whole story. Realizing a partner's importance is an essential part of our life. Sometimes we should leave our ego behind to save our relationship. Redemption is the only way out. The smell of black tea wafted in the air. Martha turned off the stove and arranged the teacups on the table where Thomas was reading the Daily Times newspaper. Over the years, the couple had become a habit of having breakfast together before leaving for work. The kids usually have breakfast first before joining their school bus. For the couple's breakfast was more or less a time to bond, chat, and eat. Adams lost his wife yesterday. The doctors couldn't save her. Thomas disclosed the sad news to his wife. Martha's hands covered her mouth, and her eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God! God's blessing and peace. How is Adam managing the whole situation?" "He is devastated. Maybe we should help him with some chores." "Of course, yes. How can I help?" Thompson swirled his tea with his spoon and thought before replying. "Can you take care of cooking for him?" "Of course. I will help him around the house for a while." "All right, I think this arrangement is fine. We can make him some hot meal once a week, since he has no close relatives living in the area." "Sure, I think I can do that at the end of each week." "Thank you." Thompson squeezed his wife's hands and smiled sweetly at her. In his heart, he knew he could always count on her. Martha playfully slaps his shoulder. "Don't thank me. He's our friend. I feel sorry for Adams. It must be a huge toll on him." After breakfast, the couple headed out for work. They both agreed to attend the deceased burial at noon. When her phone rang, she knew it was her husband. At the same time, she noticed it was noon. It seemed as though time was fast. Earlier, when she got to work, she had taken permission to attend Jenny's burial. Thompson was dressed in an all-black suit and shirt. Martha knew the moment didn't call for flattery, but she couldn't but admire how gorgeous her husband looked. It seemed as though God himself created him. His slender build showed just how much he worked out. His hair was always well-trimmed and usually smelled nice. On the other hand, Martha wore a black gown that ended just below her knees. She packed her hair in a ponytail, making her look younger than usual. She didn't wear jewelry, since Thompson had informed her of the ceremony. The couple were 16 minutes late when they arrived at the cemetery. The priest had already started the procession. The weather was slowly darkening, meaning it would begin to rain soon. Hence, the priest tried to speed up the process. While lying the coffin on the ground, it started to drizzle. Adams clutched a stalk of rose flowers in his hand. He was unable to say any last words to his deceased wife. He stared blankly at the coffin. Martha stared at him deep in thought. She couldn't help but wonder if he was crying or if the drizzle had splattered on his face. For close to 2 weeks, Martha had been shuffling her job, taking care of her family and Adams, who showed no sign of coming out of his depression. Martha was in the laundry room, sorting out the laundry, sorting a new set of clothes to send into the machine, and folding the dry ones. She was focused on completing the task. Suddenly, she felt a hand sneak around her waist, and a soft lip pecked her cheek. She blushed and nudged Thompson by his side. "Babe, the kids are home." Thompson taps her head. "Your head is always filled with dirty thoughts. I'm just playing around with my wife. Nothing more." "Oh, I see. Can I help you out?" "Sure." Martha replies and assigns him a task. While doing the chores, Thompson keeps staring at her, unsure how to present the issue in his mind. Noticing her husband's frequent stares, Martha inquires about why he has been staring. "Is there something you would like to ask or say?" "I think 1 meal a week is not enough for Adam." "Oh, maybe, but I can only cook at the end of the week." Thompson looks at her shyly and speaks apprehensively. "Maybe we could try cooking twice a week? I'd help out. But how? I work 5 days a week in 2 jobs." "Yes, I'm sorry. It was a bit selfish of me to do that." Martha breathes deeply. She feels uncomfortable knowing her husband was trying to be selfless and caring towards his friends, but she is thinking about her job first. It must be hard for him, right? Did he ask for a meal, or is it just your thoughts? "Well, I got it from his words," Thompson said while scratching his head. Okay, I'll take some time off every Wednesday and cook for him. Our friend has lost his wife. My boss should understand. Thank you. Thompson pecked his wife on the cheeks. He was grateful to God for blessing him with an understanding wife. The mall was particularly busy since it was the weekend. There was a long queue at the checkpoint. It seemed that everyone was trying to restock their groceries or shop for items for their families. Martha was rolling her cart out of the mall, feeling tired. She was at the checkpoint for more than 30 minutes before it got to her turn. While offloading the groceries into the car's trunk, her phone kept ringing. From the ringing tone, she knew it was her husband, because she had a distinct ringing tone for him. She rummaged through her bag and found her phone. Thompson sounded desperate from his end, and the rush in his voice unsettled her. Did you get everything? Yes, I got everything that was on the list, and I added a little of my own. Is everything okay? Good. He just sent me the message. He wants only the DiCaprio pasta. Martha pulled a long face. Although Thompson couldn't see her, he could tell she was unhappy from her voice. DiCaprio, what is that? It's a brand of pasta or something. I think his wife used to cook that for him. Martha inhales profoundly, trying not to explode, and talks calmly with her husband. There's a queue at the mall. He may have to make do with what we have. Darling, as much as I hate to inconvenience you, can we just do this for the sake of our friend? I'm not impressed by this. I was just at the counter for close to 30 minutes, but it's fine. I could get someone to help me out since it's just pasta. Reluctantly, Martha returned to the mall to get the pasta. Ever since Adams lost his wife, his routine changed. It became as though they started living for Adams. Today, she hoped they could take a break and have a little time for themselves. After cooking for her family and storing Adams' food in a pack, she notified her husband that they could drive down to Adams. The couple had a quiet trip down to Adams' house. Thompson pulled over and reached out for Martha's hand. Martha finally spoke for the first time in their 15-minute drive. Take the food to him and come back immediately, okay? Let's go to the lake together. I don't want to miss the show. Thompson sighs uncomfortably and explains, Sorry, he asked me if I could help him clean up his garage. Okay, I mean it's been 2 months since his wife passed away. Yes, sorry. By the way, he would like you to cook 3 times a week for him. Martha stared blankly at her husband. She couldn't believe he could suggest that, knowing her boss already hated her. You know the situation I'm in at work, so did you tell him that I can't? She noticed her husband couldn't even look her straight in the eye. He stuttered while replying. Not yet. I said that you would probably be okay with that. What? I have a full-time job. I still have to clean the house and do chores. Cook for our children and you and Adams. Thompson held her hand to convince her. Well, this is temporary. He is suffering enough these days. Martha felt her husband was overindulging Adams. Deep down, she wanted to yell at him, but decided to concede to his request. Despite being unhappy, Martha played along for her husband's sake. Weeks went by, and Adams wasn't showing any signs of independence. He still relied on Thompson and his wife. Martha felt like a burden was on her. She had volunteered to help, not cast a duty on herself, and create a rift between herself and her husband. Recently, Adams' requests were irking her, and no matter what he requested, her husband always gave in. Thompson was in the office dozing off when a message notification woke him up. Hi, this is Nicholas. I have some guests tonight, 6 people. Can you arrange something for the table? Thompson immediately tries to contact his wife, but she doesn't take her calls. He kept on sending messages, but she didn't reply. At 6 p.m., he called his wife, but got no response. He also called the house line, yet there was no response. He stormed into the house by 7:30 p.m. Martha was dressing, her phone, and snacking on a bowl of grapes. He felt his blood boil. Why didn't you pick up the phone today? Thompson asked angrily. Did I have to? Thompson was taken aback by her rudeness. His wife had always been calm and level-headed. He breathed and explained. Adams had guests over and had to order pizza. So what? What's wrong with ordering some pizza for his friends? Everyone knows he has no wife anymore. Maybe, but he is my friend and your friend too. What would the guests think of this? What a shame for us. Martha had enough of the torture. She needed Thompson to understand that they had done enough for Adams. "Oh, sorry, dear husband. I can only be your wife. I can't be his wife at the same time." "What are you talking about? Don't you get it? I cook 3 times a week for him, on our money. Maybe it's enough already. You spend time with him in the garage and play games so that he isn't bored. But you do that when you have free time, but I have no free time." "This is temporary," Thompson screamed at his wife. He couldn't understand what possessed her. "It should stop. 4 months have already passed. Hello? He has already started inviting his friends and having fun. He could have learned to cook already." The couple kept arguing back and forth. Thompson thought his wife was being unreasonably cruel. Martha, on the other hand, believed her husband was being soft-hearted. Finally, Martha suggested, "Why don't you cook for him, Mr. Nice Man?" "I don't know how to cook. Maybe you should quit your job. If you quit, you could cook for him every day. Your salary is miserable anyways." "What the hell are you talking about? Do you dare degrade my work for your friend? Screw you. Screw you and your friend. I'm out of this shit. I'm not playing this game anymore." Martha felt hurt. She couldn't believe her husband had spoken those words. She felt like she didn't matter to him anymore. "Darling, calm down. Stop talking about him like that and consider my words. Thompson, I'm not his secretary. I am not Mother Teresa to him. I have my jobs. I have worries. Everything has a limit. You are not protecting me right now, and he owns our life, controls it, and dictates what we should do." Thompson looked at his wife, feeling a bit unsettled. He realized there was an element of truth in her words. Without waiting for her husband's reply, she declared, "From this day on, there will be no food for him. I'm quitting taking care of him. Give, but give until it hurts. Mother Teresa." It was an early Monday morning, and it's going to be a long day at work because last Friday, I called in sick because I was recovering from the hangover I had on Thursday night, after my friends forced me to a club to celebrate one of ours, who just got promoted at work. I had so much to drink, even though I was supposed to take just a little, because my tolerance for alcohol was low. Hence, the hangover was inevitable. I lost myself while dancing, and as far as I remember, I danced like no one was watching, even though I could be timid on a typical day. I'm an ambivert, so blending into the social part of me wasn't so tricky anyways. Besides, I was drunk, and you know what alcohol does. It brings out the crazy amount of you with some confidence. Some guys shot their shots at the club, but I never gave them attention, as I assumed them to be time wasters, especially white guys. I had learned the hard way from my ordeal with my ex-boyfriend, who was a redneck. He'd generally given me a wrong impression about white guys. A story for another day. While I turned all of these guys down, a particular black dude got me hands down. I didn't know what he did to me, but I must confess, it got me real good. I didn't hesitate when he offered to buy me a drink, and even invited me to dance with him, even though I had turned down tons of guys that had come earlier. The last thing I remember at the club was dancing with him, and the next thing was finding myself in my bed after a call from my office woke me on Friday morning. I had even missed previous calls while sleeping. I probably might have dozed off after dancing with the guy when my friends brought me home. I'm a young black woman in her late 20s with a good-paying job. I often get the "you are so lucky" line, but I waved it off as I don't regard it as a compliment, as I don't believe in luck, but rather hard work. My hard work has got me to where I am today, because I work extraordinarily to earn extravagantly. I'm a beautiful damsel because the mirror doesn't lie. My friends often compliment me, while I giggle and blush softly, trying not to make it obvious, you know, the big girl thing. On a more serious note, I need no one's approval to accept that I'm beautiful. My philosophy about beauty is that every human, black or white, is gorgeous, as we are all fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm ready for today and all the stress that comes with it since I skipped Friday, and Monday is a naturally busy day. Deep down, I pitied myself, but shrugged my shoulders after remembering I am blessed with the best colleague at work. My colleague is named Mark. He's a sweet guy. He helps out with everything. He always makes work easy for me, justifying his kind gestures with a particular statement. You're an angel, and you deserve zero stress. I'll help you out. I can't help but blush whenever he utters this line, as the line never gets old. A noticeable blush this time as the big girl in me vanishes, and I often react with a smile and a soft tone. Thank you. As I got to work, I noticed Mark wasn't in his seat, and that was so unlike him, as he gets to work before anyone does. So I asked the secretary why Mark wasn't in the office yet. Then she gave me the shocker of my life. Did you guess what she said? Possibly you thought right. The secretary informed me that Mark has been sick and won't be coming today, as he was even absent on Friday, as was I. This isn't good, I muttered. I said further that a good guy like Mark doesn't deserve to fall sick. Just then it crossed my mind why he didn't call me on Friday morning, as I didn't show up early, because he gives me the first call each time I stay late, before the secretary calls. But he didn't even call throughout the weekend. It was unusual, and I should have sensed that before now. I felt terrible. I didn't call the poor guy, but I was going to make it up to him by stopping by his apartment after work to check on him and drop off some provisions. I knew I was in deep shit at that moment. I received the information about Mark from the secretary. I'd have to cover for all of the work myself, and at least cover some of Mark's, because he would do the same if I were in his shoes. I've got some brief board meetings to attend and some proposals to submit to the boss. I immediately started the work. I still had some other tasks. I will reach the nearby mall to get stuff done after work hours, drop by Mark's apartment, prepare dinner when I get home, and then prepare for the next day. As a senior staff member, I close at 4 p.m., but I have stayed till 5 p.m. already, and I need to start packing up to attend other things I scheduled for the day before night comes. I will cover the rest tomorrow since I listened to the urgent and important ones already, I said to myself as I dashed out of the office. I divided my tasks as I set a proposed timetable to make them attainable and more accessible for me. I drove to the mall down the road and finished shopping even before the time I had set. At least I'd have more time to myself. The next was to visit Mark. I immediately started my car engine. It gave a weird sound, but I didn't even mind. I zoomed off. Did I mention Mark's house was far from the office? How he managed to get to work before any of us every day is what amazes me. He's a workaholic. I was on a highway and I was driving so fast. If you saw my pace, two things would likely cross your mind. I had just joined Dominic Toronto and his colleagues for another Fast and Furious race, or I was driving for Professor in another money heist mission. The experience, however, didn't end well. Just while I was enjoying my whole Fast and Furious ride, one of my car tires blew out of its spot while the car was still in motion. I was scared that it didn't even know when I matched the brake. My steering had stiffed, and the car's screeching sound as it reached to the brake got me scarier, but thankfully it stopped. I believe God loves me because I might have lost my life to that accident, but I came out without a scratch. I get out from the car as I was trying to imagine what would have happened if the vehicle had refused to stop. I was grateful to God. I immediately ran to grab my phone in the car to call my mechanic, but it was off already. I left my charger home and didn't even have a car charger. It became apparent that I was stranded as I didn't know what to do next. It was a deserted highway with just a few passing cars. I tried waving down for some vehicles in motion to signal for aid, but none waited. I got tired and frustrated, as no one was ready to help, possibly because it was a dry area and it was getting cloudy already. But all I needed is a damn phone to call an Uber, I grumbled. I was worn out and felt like crying, as little things drove me teary. How do I manage the timetable I had set? I said to myself as I kicked the car in anger. It was painful, but I didn't mind. After a few minutes, a Ford 150 drove past me, but pulled over after a few seconds, just around where my car stopped. I saw a redneck guy come down from the vehicle, approaching the direction where my car stopped. I looked away as I didn't expect anything good to come from a redneck guy, and had promised not to have anything to do with rednecks. I needed his help, but my ego was more important than whatever favor I thought within myself. The next thing I heard was a baritone voice asking if there was a problem. I immediately answered him, claiming everything was fine, but he insisted that a young lady wouldn't just decide to stay on the highway if everything was fine. I yelled at him to let me be, but he insisted he only came to help. For a second, I thought it would be nice to trash the ego as I needed help. He was about to take his leave, since I wasn't ready to give him an audience like the gentle guy I suppose he was. Swiftly, I asked him to wait as I moved towards him reluctantly. I explained how my tire suddenly blew out, and it's awful as I have a lot to do within a short period, and I'm running out of time already. He didn't utter a word as he moved around my vehicle, checking if any other part of my vehicle had developed a fault. Still, I guess it was just the tire, as I had to take it to the workshop for a monthly mechanical checkup, and my mechanic would have hinted to me if he had detected anything. Not long after, he made a call to someone, and all I could hear was, "Yeah, I'll text you the address right away. Thank you," and he dropped the call. That must have been his mechanic. I was lost while standing because I would have doubted if anyone had told me earlier that a redneck would be saving my ass this evening. He was typing on his phone while I tried to process the unbelievable. I supposed he was texting the mechanic. When he finished, he asked where I was going. I told him I was headed to a colleague's place before my car tire blew out. He offered to drive me down, but I rejected him. As I shouldn't stress further, he insisted, so I hopped in his car. While in the car, he asked if I had the means to get home once I left my colleagues, or if I'd be staying over at his place. I told him I was only going to check on him as he was sick, and as well deliver the stuff I had got him. I won't be staying long as it's already getting late, and I have to prepare for work tomorrow. I told him I was only going to check on him as he was sick, and as well deliver the stuff I got him, and I won't be staying long as it's getting late already and I have to prepare for work tomorrow, but told him I'd sort myself and thanked him. Then he said if that's the case, he will wait to take me home since he's free. Trust me, I insisted it won't be necessary, but he was obstinate. It didn't seem like he was ready to succumb, so I gave in instead. We got to Mark's apartment and I met him in the living room. I sharply asked that he forgives me for not calling or checking on him during the time as I didn't know he was sick. I told him about what I encountered on my way to his place and explained how God had sent one redneck guy to my aid. I told him he was outside and needed to start going, so I didn't delay the new guy further. Mark thanked me for the stuff I got him and assured me he would resume the following day. I dashed out and made my way to where the guy parked. He drove to a restaurant and got me a takeaway meal while I stayed in the car. He said I must be famished and exhausted to cook when I get home. He later drove to my house as I directed him at every junction. He possibly hadn't been to my area before. He looked too expensive for my hood, even though my hood isn't rotten anyways. He dropped me at my entrance. I was surprised, although the moment we were in the car, he didn't even ask for my name or phone number, at least as compensation for the favor he rendered. I thanked him profusely, as I was amused at such a kind gesture. I asked if he would come in for a drink, but he refused as he said he had to catch up with friends at the bar because it was around 8 p.m. already. When he was about to go, he told me my car was safe as it had been towed to his mechanic's workshop, who gave him the update when I was still with Mark. I was ecstatic. I was about to ask how to locate the mechanic, but he cut in before I could ask for the time I resumed work daily. I didn't hesitate to reply, at 8 a.m. Although I didn't know why he asked, then he informed me he had already sorted my car expenses, which would be delivered to my compound before I leave for my office tomorrow, as he would text the mechanic my home address, and he zoomed off. I stood as I watched his car disappear into thin air. I didn't doubt his kindness for a second, as it was just too accurate and undiluted. I was assured he would keep to his promise, so I slept like a baby with no worries. I was not wrong. The redneck guy kept his word. The mechanic's honk on my gate woke me the following day, as he delivered my car with a new set of tires. Just one tire blew out, but I guess the redneck must have paid for 4 replacements. I was astonished, more dumbfounded, but I tried to package up so the mechanic didn't see the expression on my face. When I asked the mechanic for his number, he told me he had already given him a stern warning not to release it, as he thought I might want to thank him. However, he sent a short note in a paper which reads thus: "I pulled over yesterday because you're a beautiful black woman who doesn't deserve to be in distress. And it was an honor I was able to help in my little way." That day, the redneck guy changed my perceptions about white guys. He taught me most nicely and quickly that not all rednecks are racists. On that note, I understood the fact that kindness is more about personality and less about color. His single mother raised Dan because his father divorced his mom and left them when he was just 3 months old, for reasons unknown to him. Han, Dan's mother, was optimistic that her husband, Dan's father, would return until she received the worst news of her life. She was at work when a colleague told her Dan's father had remarried. That must have been why he divorced. It was because just a few months after he left for no reason, he had moved on. He must have been seeing the other woman all along. Ever since then, Han didn't remarry. The decision wasn't all planned out, though, because she only thought to remain single for a very few years, until Dan would be mature enough to take care of himself and his potential half-siblings. So she dedicated her whole time to working to provide for their needs. Significantly, the basics: food, clothes, and shelter. Mrs. Han was working hard and could be categorized under the upper middle class in her city. In other words, they were average citizens who were not satisfied, but as well not starving. Mrs. Han's perception and decision about remarrying, once Dan reaches his adolescence stage, didn't take long before it changed. This is due to her stories about her step-parents, which worsen daily. These stories are, of course, unpleasant and often harmful. If it's not news of a stepfather maltreating and physically abusing his stepchild, it would be that of a stepmother harassing her stepchild. All of this news together didn't encourage her to settle down with any other man, as she didn't want anyone to ill-treat her dear son. This continued for years, as she didn't give any man a chance. When Dan was 10, he used to come back late from school, as he was preparing for his high school examination, leaving Han lonely, as there was no one to chit-chat to, or gist unimportant topics during the day, and by night Dan ate and goes to bed to prepare for the next day. He gets home exhausted and sleeps off without eating dinner. Han, on the other hand, closes around 2 p.m., and she has no close friends except for a few colleagues who are casual friends. She only enjoys Dan's company and doesn't like it when anyone pries into their privacy, not even the neighbor next door. She got tired at some point. Watching a movie would have been a great escape from boredom, but she's terrible at it. She practically dozes off each time she watches a movie, drooling all over the place, and often Dan makes jest of her. So she stopped seeing movies as she concluded that it wasn't her thing. The boredom reached its peak, and she became a game lover. She sensed that as an excellent means to keep herself busy, but it didn't work long. Out of loneliness, she decided to try some dinner dates, even though she had decided not to date anymore. She only wanted to pass the time. Han was 39 and would be clocking 40 in a few months, but I guess she was still attractive and radiant, as men didn't stop chasing after her. No doubt, Han is a beautiful woman. She looked so tender and young, even younger than her age, that many mistakes her for being in her late 20s. Probably because she eats good food and a lot of fruit, some men find it difficult to believe she truly has a son. Instead, they think she claimed to avoid dating men. At times she gets frustrated and gets out of her way to prove herself, showing them Dan's pictures on her phone so they could believe her. Of all the things, she never welcomed any man into her house because she didn't know what Dan would think of her. She instead sees these men during the day but never flirts with any and turns down their offers when they ask her out on a date. Change is constant, they say. Han started going on dates. She could go on a few, but the last one made her stop. She did not mind hugging her loneliness with her whole arms. She met this guy online, and he asked her out on a date, and she agreed. The location wasn't far from home, so it was more accessible for her to head home quickly before Dan got back, because he got back around 7:45 p.m. every day. The date was scheduled for 6 p.m. Han had been there around that time, but the new guy didn't reach there until some minutes past 7 p.m. While he went, he apologized for coming late. Han said it was okay, but she wouldn't be staying long since she had waited for over an hour and her son would soon be back from school. "You have a damn son?" the guy asked. Han nodded in affirmation. Han must have forgotten to mention it during their chats, because she doesn't hesitate to tell every guy she meets, but in this case, she and the new guy had only known for a few days, and everything happened so fast. The guy didn't listen to her. He flared up and called her unprintable names for not informing him earlier, as he doesn't do single mothers. When Han was about to explain why she hadn't mentioned it, the guy hurled curses at her and her son and walked out on her. Han felt so embarrassed as she left the location crying. She was more pained that she couldn't defend her innocent son in the presence of that ill-mannered guy. That made her conclude to resume her everyday life, irrespective of the level of loneliness she encounters. After some weeks to keep herself focused, she started working as a freelancer online, as she was a professional website designer. This became their everyday lives. Han didn't remarry, but could take care of herself and Dan with her little earnings, and they lived fine. Han ensured her son wasn't intimidated by his colleagues, especially for not having his father around. She tried to get him virtually everything he asked for, and made sure he attended the best university in the city, even if she had to struggle to pay his tuition. 15 years later, Dan was done with school and started working. He lives a vivid life, works in a reputable organization, and earns excellent money. He has a girlfriend, Tilda, and a best friend, Tony, who lives with him. He was staying in a different state from where he grew up. Dan feeds and clothes them, and every week they go to parties where he lavishes money on drinks. On a fateful day, Han called her son for some financial help, as she needed to pay for her rent. But Dan turned her down, claiming that he was broke, but she should call after a week. After 1 week, Han called her son again, since he had promised her, but he said he had been tight and exhausting and claimed he was busy. He told her to call back after 3 days. Han didn't hesitate to call back, as she needed the money for rent badly. This time, Dan stopped picking up his mom's calls. At this point, the mom observed he's been lying all along, because she knows he earns considerably every month. She doesn't know where he stays. Maybe she would even have confronted him physically. When Han could not pay her rent, she was kicked out of the house. She wasn't allowed to pick a pen, as she was threatened with being arrested. She had no friends, as her only companion is her son, who suddenly turns against her. The son has stopped picking up her calls, and she has no family in the city. Han has stopped working for a while now, but she was able to gather her remaining little pension and savings to rent a stuffy single room. She has no mattress, pillow, or possessions except for 2 clothes and a wrapper. She sleeps on the floor, wearing one cloth, while she lies on her wrapper every night, and every morning she washes her clothes to wear at night. Feeding was difficult, as she only ate once a day, often in the afternoon, because she had to manage the money she had left. Sooner than expected, Karma visited Dan as he fell sick. It was a severe illness. Tilda and Tony had rushed him to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with some weird defect in his body system. Hence, surgery was the only solution. He has the money to pay for his surgery. Still, the straw that broke the camel's back was part of the blood replacement, as he needed a blood transfusion from a donor that matched his own immediately after the surgery, as he would have lost a lot of blood during the surgery. It was urgent, so he summoned Tilda, his girlfriend, for a donor test. But she said she would come later, and before Dan could say another word, she had cut the call. Immediately, Dan called Tony, severally, but he didn't pick up, and when he eventually did, he claimed he was busy and will come later. Dan was so disappointed but more uneasy as his pains persisted. He later thought of his mom and called her. The mom, hearing his voice over the phone, figured out that something was wrong with her son. Dan explained himself, and Han immediately asked for the hospital's address. She needed money to travel down. So she ran to the street to beg for money so she could reach there on time. After some hours, she accumulated cash and traveled to meet her son. Dan's case had worsened, and it seemed like he would die soon. The mom had compassion for her son and asked them to run a test. Fortunately, her blood matched, and the transfusion procedures began. It was a success, as both Dan and his mother were okay. Dan regretted his evil actions. He sobbed bitterly as he pleaded for his mom's forgiveness, blaming his stupidity and devilish friends. The mother also cried, forgave him, and after 3 days they were discharged. Dan chased Tilda and Tony out of his house and begged his mother to move in with him, as he had 3 flats. He promised not ever to forsake her. Han was happy again, and they lived in the same compound happily ever after. This story shows that the impacts of mothers cannot be sidelined now or ever. They are rare gems and are small gods. A mother will always come through, regardless of her child's shortcomings. Hence, as a child, you must love your mother, irrespective of her flaws. No friend, platonic, casual, close, or best friend, can make up for the role of a mother. Place no friend above your mother. As kids, we must always take care of our mother, and do not wait for the right time, as there is no such thing as the right time in this case. Don't wait till you start working or earning big. Don't wait till you start driving your dream car. As a kid, you can take care of your mom by helping out in the kitchen. It's not about money or life's achievements, but the act of responsibility. Take care of your mom by being there when they need you. Not everyone will get a second chance like Dan.